Welcome back to the Sera Werewolf Romance Collection, where the alphas are fiercely possessive and the heroines never back down. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments, and drop a paw print emoji if your pet is currently judging your audiobook choices, or maybe acting like an alpha themselves. Today, we have an absolute masterpiece. It's hilarious, it's intensely steamy, and it involves a fiercely organized translator with a fountain pen and a very dangerous Lycan King who just kicked her door off its hinges. But before we start the standoff, if you want to support the channel and get early access to addictive stories just like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the preternatural romance flowing. Now, get comfortable and take a deep breath. She put up a do not disturb sign, but the Alpha King is about to become the ultimate disturbance. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Sloane Delaney navigated her highly reliable, slightly dented, silver compact sedan through the winding, meticulously manicured driveway of the opulent Summit Hotel. The vehicle's modest engine purred steadily, a stark contrast to the lavish, flashy sports cars already occupying the valet roundabout. She shifted the transmission into park, exhaling a measured breath that did little to mitigate her profound exhaustion. Her flawless pale skin felt tight, and her striking dark eyes were heavy from a grueling cross-country drive, but her professional armor remained entirely impenetrable. She adjusted the lapels of her vibrant sapphire blue blazer, ensuring the tailored garment fell perfectly over her crisp white blouse. Reaching into the passenger seat, Sloane retrieved her heavy digital tablet, verifying that her high-capacity, slate-gray portable battery pack was securely tethered to the device. She possessed an obstinate fear of technological failure. Allowing her translation archives to lose power during a geopolitical crisis was a catastrophic impossibility. She tucked her favorite fountain pen, equipped with a pristine silver nib, into her breast pocket. Finally, she hoisted the ventilated travel carrier containing Minnie. The remarkably grumpy, exceptionally chunky orange tabby cat let out a loud, highly judgmental yowl of protest. "I entirely concur, Ninny," Sloane murmured, her voice a cheerful customer service cadence masking her internal dread. "The Lycan Summit is an administrative nightmare, but the compensation is necessary." Sloane stepped out of the vehicle, her signature fragrance, a luxurious, intoxicating blend of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea, cutting through the crisp mountain air. She handed her keys to a bewildered valet and marched through the massive glass double doors of the hotel's grand lobby. The interior was a staggering display of architectural dominance, featuring towering marble columns and lavish crystal chandeliers. It was also, currently, a highly volatile war zone. In the center of the lobby, two towering men of white descent were actively engaging in a territorial dispute. Their broad shoulders were rigidly tense, their canines extending as a dangerous, guttural frequency vibrated through the marble floor. Elite guards formed a nervous perimeter, entirely unsure how to pacify the encroaching violence without sparking a diplomatic incident. Sloane did not hesitate. She approached the furious apex predators, her heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic tempo against the stone. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Sloane announced, her high-pitched, aggressively polite tone sliced through the feral aggression like a scalpel. She held up her heavy digital tablet, utilizing the indestructible screen as a physical barrier. "I am Sloane Delaney, the geopolitical translator assigned to this chaotic endeavor. Are you currently attempting to initiate a blood feud in the reception area, or are you simply lost?" The larger of the two alphas snapped his head toward her, his eyes flashing with preternatural hostility. This territory dispute is a matter of ancestral sovereignty. Stay out of it, Omega. Sloane offered him a brilliant, fundamentally terrifying smile. She withdrew the silver-nibbed fountain pen from her pocket, tapping it against the tablet's thick casing. I profoundly respect your ancestral sovereignty. However, hotel policy mandates that all pre-summit physical altercations require the submission of a Form 8B grievance document in triplicate. Furthermore, any blood spilled on this lavish rug will result in a punitive cleaning fee billed directly to your lineage. Would you prefer I email the forms to your delegates, or will you both lower your cortisol levels and proceed to the bar? The sheer, unbothered audacity of her bureaucratic reprimand completely derailed their feral instincts. The alphas stared at the petite woman in the sapphire blue blazer, utterly perplexed by her refusal to submit to their dominant posturing. Thoroughly humiliated by the administrative red tape, they exchanged a final, venomous glare before retreating in opposite directions. Excellent conflict mitigation, Sloane whispered to herself, holstering her pen. After retrieving her room assignment from the highly relieved reception staff, Sloane navigated the labyrinthine corridors to the west wing. She reached the heavy oak door of Suite 402, unlocked it, and stepped into the luxurious, deeply shadowed room. She immediately released Ninny from the carrier. The chunky orange tabby waddled out, immediately hopping onto the plush velvet sofa to aggressively groom his tail. Sloane dropped her tablet and slate-gray battery pack onto the mahogany desk. She was fundamentally depleted. Her primary motivation was to ensure no aristocratic alpha ever exploited a legal loophole again. But tonight, her only objective was restorative sleep. She opened her luggage, retrieved a thick, printed cardboard placard, and opened her door one final time. She looped the sign over the exterior brass handle. It read in bold, uncompromising red letters, "Do not disturb." She pulled the heavy door shut, engaging the thick metal deadbolt with a definitive, satisfying click. She was officially off the clock, completely unaware of the lethal investigation currently spiraling out of control in the hallway. Chapter 2. The opulent suite was enveloped in a profound, tranquil silence. Sloane Delaney had discarded her sapphire blue blazer and tailored trousers in favor of a luxurious, floor-length plum silk robe that cascaded elegantly over her pale skin. She stood in the opulent ensuite bathroom, methodically cleansing her face, entirely prepared to succumb to a mandatory 8-hour sleep cycle. In the adjacent living area, Ninny, the chunky orange tabby cat, was snoring softly, an uninterrupted rhythm of domestic peace. Suddenly, a deafening, explosive crash shattered the quiet. The sound was viscerally violent, a concussive boom of splintering wood and fracturing metal. Sloane dropped her hand towel, her striking dark eyes widening in momentary shock. She did not scream. Her preternatural Omega instincts spiked, her pulse accelerating as she swiftly evaluated the threat level. She marched out of the bathroom, her bare feet silent against the thick Persian rug. The heavy oak door of her suite was no longer attached to its frame. The formidable barrier had been kicked entirely off its hinges, the thick wood lying fractured and violently splintered on the carpet. The deadbolt mechanism hung uselessly from the ruined jamb. The law of physical causality dictated that her secure perimeter was now a gaping, drafty hole, exposing her to the corridor. Standing amidst the jagged wooden debris was a man, radiating a volatile, exhausting intensity. Michael Caldwell was a monolithic, physical specimen of white descent. He possessed dark, unruly hair and a sharp, aristocratic jawline set in a mask of absolute, lethal determination. His broad, uncompromising shoulders seemed to consume all the available oxygen in the room. He wore a crisp, dark shirt and a sharply tailored blazer, and affixed to his left wrist was a massive platinum chronograph watch that gleamed with an astounding, undeniable wealth. Hidden securely within the inner pocket of his jacket was the heavy silver signet ring representing his sovereign royal crest, a secret he guarded ruthlessly. He was breathing heavily, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes scanning the room with predatory stillness, actively tracking a phantom threat. "This is a catastrophic violation of hospitality protocols," Sloane announced, her tone an aggressively cheerful administrative pitch that completely masked the adrenaline thrumming through her veins. Michael's head snapped toward her. He had expected an assassin, a rogue syndicate operative fleeing through the ventilation. Instead, he found a petite woman in a plum silk robe, her glossy black hair twisted into an elegant French twist, staring at him with an aura of indomitable administrative fury. He opened his mouth to issue a harsh command, to demand her compliance in an active security sweep, but the words instantly died in his throat. As he stepped further into the suite, a luxurious, intoxicating fragrance permeated his heightened olfactory senses. It was a potent, complex blend of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea. The scent hit Michael with the force of a preternatural shockwave. For decades, his feral Lycan beast had raged just beneath the surface of his skin, demanding a violence he constantly had to suppress to rule effectively. But the absolute second he inhaled Sloane's signature fragrance, the vicious roaring in his mind immediately silenced. The profound, visceral recognition of the mating bond anchored him to the floorboards. "You are trespassing in a private domicile," Sloane continued, entirely unbothered by his intimidating posture. She walked smoothly over to the mahogany desk, picking up her heavy digital tablet and her silver-nibbed fountain pen. She aggressively tapped the screen, her pale fingers flying across the digital interface. "There is a security breach," Michael finally managed to rasp, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble that resonated deep within his chest. He could not tear his whiskey-colored eyes away from her. The biological obsession was instantaneous and absolute. "The only security breach currently occurring is your foot connecting with my architecture," Sloane retorted sweetly. She approached him, stopping precisely 2 feet away, a carefully calculated boundary. She extended the digital tablet toward his broad chest. Displayed on the indestructible screen was a meticulously itemized bill. "What is this?" Michael asked, staring blankly at the glowing numbers. "This is an invoice for the destruction of a structural barrier, inclusive of emotional distress damages and a punitive fee for ignoring the highly visible 'Do Not Disturb' placard," Sloane explained, her smile sharp and unyielding. "I require an immediate digital transfer, or I will file a formal grievance with the Territorial Council. Are you paying with a corporate account or personal funds?" Michael stared down at the fearless, sassy Omega demanding compensation from the apex predator who ruled the continent. A slow, cynical, entirely mesmerized smirk curved his lips. His feral wolf was absolutely obsessed. "Personal funds," Michael murmured, his gaze darkening with a possessive intensity. "But I am going to require a receipt." Chapter 3. The gaping hole where the heavy oak door used to reside allowed a distinct, chilly draft to infiltrate the luxurious West Wing suite. Sloane Delaney stood her ground on the Persian rug, her plum silk robe pulled tightly around her slender frame. The shattered wooden debris remained scattered precisely where it had fallen. The architectural casualty was a permanent fixture until a specialized carpentry detail could be dispatched. Michael Caldwell did not retreat. He stood amidst the ruins of his own explosive entry, his massive frame radiating a dark, unwavering focus. The intoxicating fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea continued to sedate his feral instincts, yet his intellectual mind remained calculating. The rogue assassin he had been violently tracking had vanished, their trail miraculously severed near this very corridor. "I am the head of security for this summit," Michael lied effortlessly, bypassing his true sovereign identity. He reached into the pocket of his tailored dark trousers and retrieved a highly advanced, encrypted, matte black satellite phone. "And while I will gladly process this ridiculous invoice, I require your immediate professional cooperation." "My professional cooperation operates on a strictly regimented schedule," Sloane countered, her administrative tone dripping with polite, razor-sharp sarcasm. She aggressively organized the position of her slate-gray portable battery pack on the mahogany desk to soothe her mounting irritation. "It is currently past midnight. My contract clearly stipulates that all geopolitical translations and linguistic consultations are suspended until standard operational hours. You may submit your inquiry to my digital queue." "This cannot wait for a queue," Michael rumbled, his whiskey-colored eyes narrowing. He slid his satellite phone back into his pocket and withdrew a crumpled, heavy parchment. It was stained with dark, dried blood and covered in jagged, archaic symbols. Sloane's expressive dark eyes darted to the parchment. Her perspicacious mind instantly recognized the visual structure of the text, but she forced her posture to remain rigid. "A blood-stained manuscript does not constitute a scheduling emergency. It constitutes a biohazard. I suggest you consult the janitorial staff." "It was intercepted from a spy, attempting to sabotage the territorial agreements," Michael stated, taking a deliberate step closer. The sheer, uncompromising width of his shoulders seemed to box her in, though he was careful not to project lethal aggression toward his newly discovered mate. "My intelligence network cannot decipher the dialect. You are the premier preternatural linguist on this continent. I need to know what it says before the summit commences tomorrow morning." "Absolutely not," Sloane refused, folding her arms. "The elite Lycan hierarchy has a historical precedent of exploiting expedited translations to justify sudden, violent territorial liquidations. I will not be rushed into a linguistic analysis that could inadvertently trigger a war. Furthermore, I am tired. The structural integrity of my room is compromised, and my cat requires a tranquil environment." As if on cue, Ninny, the remarkably grumpy and exceptionally chunky orange tabby, let out a low, disgruntled trill from the velvet sofa, his yellow eyes glaring at the towering intruder. Michael's sharp, aristocratic jawline tensed. His beast demanded absolute compliance, but his rational mind recognized that Sloane's administrative defiance was an impenetrable fortress. If he attempted to command her, she would simply hand him another form. He needed to utilize the one language the working-class bureaucracy definitively understood. "I will compensate you for your time," Michael declared, a cynical smirk returning to his lips. He tapped the heavy platinum chronograph watch on his wrist. "My security budget is highly discretionary. Name your hourly rate for emergency after-hours consultation." Sloane paused, her flawless pale skin catching the ambient light of the room. She rapidly calculated an astronomical, highly offensive number in her head. A figure so obscenely expensive it would fundamentally insult standard budgetary constraints and force him to leave. She stated the sum with a cheerful, challenging tilt of her chin. Michael did not even blink. He withdrew his secure satellite phone, his thumbs flying rapidly across the encrypted interface. "Done," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, lethal vibration of absolute wealth. "The funds have just been wired to the Independent Banking Coalition under your primary operational account. You are now officially retained for the evening." Sloane stared at him, genuinely stunned. No mere hotel security chief possessed the liquid capital to instantaneously authorize a transfer of that staggering magnitude without a committee review. She gripped her silver-nibbed fountain pen tightly, a cold shard of suspicion piercing her exhaustion. "You are exceptionally well-funded for an enforcer," Sloane observed, her dark eyes narrowing with intense scrutiny. "I take the security of my territory incredibly seriously," Michael replied, offering her the blood-stained parchment. "Now, Miss Delaney, shall we examine the dialect?" Chapter 4. Sloane Delaney refused to conduct a highly sensitive linguistic analysis while shivering in a compromised room. She strode purposefully past the shattered remnants of her heavy oak door, leaving Michael Caldwell to hover by the entrance like a monolithic sentinel. She approached the wall of the opulent sitting area and twisted the sleek metallic dial that controlled the modern gas fireplace. A flawless, mechanically regulated stream of blue and warm orange flames ignited instantly over the artificial ceramic logs. The device operated on strict technological logistics. There were no dying embers to monitor, nor any archaic iron tools required to stoke it. It provided an immediate, comforting heat that chased the corridor's draft away. Sloane sat on the plush velvet sofa, ensuring her plum silk robe was meticulously arranged. She accepted the blood-stained parchment from Michael, handling it by the extreme edges. She placed her heavy digital tablet on the glass coffee table, plugging her slate-gray portable battery pack directly into the port to guarantee absolute, uninterrupted power. "This is not standard high Lycan," Sloane murmured, her bureaucratic facade completely dissolving into a state of intense, hyper-focused professionalism. She utilized her silver-nibbed fountain pen as a pointer, tracing the jagged runes without touching the blood. The syntactic structure utilizes a recessive, highly localized dialect native to the Northern Ridge syndicates. It is an archaic cipher, intentionally designed to look like a trade ledger to bypass standard magical auditing. Michael moved with predatory stillness, rounding the coffee table. Instead of taking the adjacent armchair, he lowered his massive frame directly onto the sofa beside her. The plush cushions dipped severely under his sturdy weight. The physical proximity was immediate and suffocating. His broad, uncompromising shoulders brushed against her arm, radiating a volatile, overwhelming heat that aggressively competed with the gas fireplace. Sloane's pulse executed a frantic, irregular rhythm against her collarbone. She attempted to subtly lean away, but the intoxicating, dark musk of his presence was completely unavoidable. "What does the ledger translate to?" Michael asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He leaned forward, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes tracking the movement of her pen across the digital screen. His face was mere inches from her neck. He inhaled deeply, drawing her signature crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea scent directly into his lungs, thoroughly sedating his feral wolf. "It is a highly coordinated logistics manifest," Sloane stammered slightly, fighting the sudden, deleterious fog invading her usually sharp mind. She tapped her digital tablet, pulling up a comparative translation matrix. "It details the movement of unregistered weaponry into the hotel's subterranean levels. The assassination is not an isolated strike. It is a siege." Before Michael could process the geopolitical severity of the revelation, a sudden, chaotic mass of orange fur launched onto the glass coffee table. Ninny, the remarkably grumpy and exceptionally chunky tabby cat, had decided the intense, crackling tension on the sofa was entirely unacceptable. The feline marched directly across the indestructible screen of Sloane's digital tablet, his heavy paws pressing a random, catastrophic sequence of interface buttons. Several translation files immediately minimized, replaced by a glaring red error notification. "Ninny, absolutely not!" Sloane gasped, her bureaucratic composure breaking. She reached forward to physically remove the domestic saboteur, terrified he had just permanently deleted the unsaved dialect matrix. Instead of retreating, Ninny executed a fluid, arrogant leap directly into Michael's lap. Michael stiffened, his lethal enforcer instincts momentarily short-circuiting. The apex predator looked down at the chunky orange cat currently kneading its claws into the fabric of his expensive dark trousers. Ninny let out a loud, rumbling purr, aggressively rubbing his face against Michael's platinum chronograph watch. Sloane stared in profound, absolute betrayal. Ninny fundamentally despised shifters. He habitually hissed at the aristocratic alphas in the lobby, yet here he was, actively claiming this terrifying, volatile man as his preferred furniture. "Your security detail is highly affectionate," Michael noted, a cynical, genuine amusement dancing in his whiskey-colored eyes. He did not shove the cat away. Instead, his large, calloused hand gently stroked Ninny's back. Sloane aggressively hit the recovery command on her tablet, successfully retrieving the digital files. She glared at the man and the traitorous feline. "He is a terrible judge of character," she lied, her cheeks flushing with a sudden, undeniable heat. The linguistic puzzle was dangerous, but the preternatural chemistry actively burning between them was proving to be a vastly superior threat. Chapter 5. The subsequent morning arrived with an unrelenting, harsh sunlight that provided zero comfort to Sloane Delaney's sleep-deprived physiology. She had spent the remaining nocturnal hours partially translating the blood-stained parchment. Leaving the West Wing suite was a logistical necessity. She had strictly mandated a specialized hotel carpentry detail to completely replace the shattered oak door and install a reinforced deadbolt. Ninny was safely sequestered in his ventilated travel carrier, indignantly yowling at the chaotic construction debris. Sloane had discarded her plum silk robe, meticulously donning a sharply tailored, rich amethyst pantsuit that projected absolute, indomitable authority. She clutched her heavy digital tablet, with her slate-gray portable battery pack securely tethered, and ensured her silver-nibbed fountain pen was clipped to her lapel. She descended into the grand lobby seeking a premium, highly concentrated espresso. The cavernous marble space, illuminated by extravagant crystal chandeliers, was already swarming with aggressive preternatural diplomats. The air was thick with competitive territorial pheromones. Before she could reach the luxurious cafe perimeter, a towering, heavily muscled man of white descent deliberately blocked her trajectory. Lord Alistair, a notoriously arrogant alpha delegate, sneered down at her. He wore a highly ostentatious dark navy suit that failed to disguise his inherently brutish posture. "The hired translator," Alistair rumbled, his tone laced with a thick, condescending malice. "You possess highly classified intelligence regarding the Northern Ridge factions. You will hand over your digital archives immediately. A fragile Omega has no jurisdiction in an apex predator's theater." Sloane halted. Her striking dark eyes assessed the lumbering threat with absolute, unbothered calculation. Her preternatural Omega instincts flared brilliantly. She was a fully capable shifter, Her sleek, viciously protective wolf form scratched at the surface of her consciousness, highly eager to fluidly metamorphose and tear out the delegate's throat. However, engaging in a physical altercation without submitting the proper grievance forms was deeply unprofessional. She inhaled a steadying breath, her signature fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea enveloping her personal space. "Good morning, Lord Alistair," Sloane replied, deploying a cheerful, high-pitched customer service cadence that was entirely devoid of actual respect. "I profoundly appreciate your unsolicited enthusiasm for my administrative archives. However, your request violates Article 7 of the Summit Confidentiality Mandate. Furthermore, attempting to intimidate a contracted geopolitical linguist before she has consumed her morning caffeine is a catastrophic miscalculation. Please step aside, or I will formally document your insubordination and ensure your territorial funding is placed under strict administrative review." Alistair's pale face flushed with violent, unrestrained indignation. His canines elongated, and he took a highly aggressive step forward, intending to physically pry the tablet from her hands. "You insolent!" The ambient temperature in the lobby plummeted instantaneously. Michael Caldwell materialized from the peripheral shadows with a preternatural, predatory stillness. He wore his crisp, dark shirt and a sharply tailored blazer, the heavy platinum chronograph watch gleaming on his wrist as his large, calloused hand clamped onto Alistair's shoulder. Michael did not shout. He simply applied a highly concentrated, bone-cracking pressure. Alistair gasped, his knees buckling under the sheer, unmitigated force of the grip. Michael leaned in, his whiskey-colored eyes radiating a volatile, exhausting intensity that completely dwarfed Alistair's posturing. His broad, uncompromising shoulders shielded Sloane entirely from the lobby's chaotic scrutiny. "The lady requested that you step aside," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, lethal vibration that commanded absolute submission. "If you ever approach her perimeter again, I will personally dismantle your skeletal structure and mail it to your sovereign." Alistair scrambled backward the absolute second he was released, his arrogance instantly replaced by visceral terror. The rival alpha fled the lobby, leaving a profound, shocked silence in his wake. Sloane adjusted her amethyst lapel, her fingers tightening around her digital tablet. She stared at her supposed head of security. The dark musk of his preternatural energy mingled aggressively with her pomegranate scent. His capacity for effortless, terrifying violence was significantly more dangerous than his job title implied, leaving her incredibly suspicious of his true geopolitical origins. Chapter 6. By mid-afternoon, the hotel's carpentry detail had executed a flawless repair of Suite 402. The gaping, drafty hole had been completely eradicated, replaced by a pristine, heavy oak door featuring a newly reinforced deadbolt. Sloane stood inside her luxurious, quiet sanctuary, having finally released Ninny from his carrier. The chunky orange tabby immediately claimed the center of the Persian rug, aggressively bathing his paws. Sloane had utilized the downtime to cross-reference the archaic Northern Ridge cipher against her digital archives. The implications of the translation were escalating into a highly volatile geopolitical disaster. A sharp, authoritative knock resonated against the new oak door. Sloane approached the entrance, her striking dark eyes narrowing. She unlocked the deadbolt with a definitive click and opened the door precisely 3 inches, maintaining a strict physical perimeter. Michael Caldwell stood in the corridor, his massive frame radiating that familiar, exhausting intensity. He still wore his tailored blazer and dark trousers, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes locked onto hers, instantly relaxing as he inhaled her luxurious crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea fragrance. His feral wolf preened at the proximity of its fated mate. "The lobby is secure," Michael announced, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I need to review your progress on the blood-stained parchment." He took a deliberate step forward, fully expecting her to yield the entryway. Sloane did not move. Instead, she smoothly slid her heavy digital tablet through the narrow gap in the door, presenting it directly to his chest. Her slate-gray portable battery pack remained safely resting on the mahogany desk behind her. "Before you breach my structural perimeter a second time, Mr. Caldwell," Sloane stated, her receptionist tone dripping with aggressive politeness, "you are required to complete this digital documentation." Michael stared at the indestructible screen. Displayed in high-resolution text was a document titled Form 4A, Temporary Security Access and Liability Protocol. "You cannot be serious," Michael muttered, a cynical, entirely mesmerized smirk curving his sharp, aristocratic jawline. "I am the primary security authority for this entire continent." "And I am the primary authority of Suite 402, Sloane countered cheerfully. She retrieved her silver-nibbed fountain pen from her amethyst pantsuit pocket and tapped the digital signature line. "This form explicitly waives your right to violently dismantle my architecture. It also mandates that you maintain a minimum distance of 3 feet from my linguistic equipment and formally acknowledges that my cat, Ninny, retains ultimate jurisdictional authority over the velvet sofa. Sign it or conduct your briefing from the hallway." Michael let out a low, breathy sound that constituted a genuine laugh. The sheer, unbothered audacity of this petite omega was an absolute revelation. He was the Lycan King, a sovereign apex predator accustomed to groveling submission. Yet this woman was obstinately utilizing bureaucratic red tape to cage his feral instincts. It was infuriating, highly restrictive, and completely intoxicating. He reached out, his large, calloused fingers brushing against hers as he accepted the tablet. A sharp, undeniable jolt of electricity arced between their skin, grounding the volatile energy thrumming through the corridor. Michael utilized his index finger to scrawl a hasty, illegible signature across the digital line. "My legal compliance is officially documented," Michael stated, handing the tablet back. "May I enter, or is there a supplementary blood test required?" "Your compliance is appreciated," Sloane replied, stepping back and pulling the heavy oak door wide open. Michael strode into the suite, his broad shoulders seemingly consuming the available space. He bypassed the Persian rug and the glaring orange tabby cat, moving directly toward the plush velvet sofa. The preternatural tension between them immediately skyrocketed, transforming the opulent room into a highly charged, claustrophobic sanctuary. Sloane secured the heavy metal lock with a definitive click. She placed her digital tablet next to her slate-gray portable battery pack on the mahogany desk. Ninny let out a judgmental trill, abandoning the rug to instantly hop onto the sofa next to Michael. The cat aggressively headbutted the man's expensive platinum watch, clearly recognizing the underlying power dynamic Sloane was desperately trying to ignore. Sloane exhaled a measured breath, mentally bracing herself for the excruciatingly intimate task of sitting beside him to translate a lethal assassination order. Chapter 7. The ambient lighting in Suite 402 was deliberately muted. Evening had completely swallowed the sky outside the towering windows. Sloane Delaney stood near the wall, her fingers precisely twisting the sleek metal dial that controlled the modern gas fireplace. A flawless, controlled stream of blue and warm orange flames ignited instantly over the artificial ceramic logs. The mechanical appliance required no iron tools, nor did it possess dying embers. It operated with an absolute, predictable consistency that greatly soothed her highly organized mind. She returned to the plush velvet sofa, ensuring her rich amethyst pantsuit remained perfectly unwrinkled. Michael Caldwell occupied the opposite cushion, his massive frame completely dominating the furniture. His tailored blazer was discarded over a nearby armchair, leaving him in a crisp, dark shirt that strained against his broad, uncompromising shoulders. Resting on the glass coffee table between them was the heavy digital tablet, securely tethered to the slate-gray battery pack and the blood-stained parchment. "The cipher is remarkably complex," Sloane murmured, her customer service facade completely dissolved by profound intellectual focus. She leaned forward, utilizing her silver-nibbed fountain pen to trace the jagged runes on the screen. "It utilizes a phonetic shifting mechanism. Every third syllable in the high Lycan text alters the meaning of the preceding sentence. It is a highly localized sabotage code." Michael shifted closer. The physical proximity was immediate and entirely suffocating. The plush cushions dipped severely under his massive weight, causing Sloane to slide a fraction of an inch toward him. His piercing, whiskey-colored eyes were fixed on the digital screen, but his preternatural senses were entirely saturated by her presence. The luxurious fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea wrapped around his feral wolf like a heavy, pacifying, weighted blanket. "Explain the logistics of the strike," Michael demanded, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated tangibly against her collarbone. "The rogue faction is exploiting a specific structural vulnerability," Sloane explained, her heart executing a frantic, irregular rhythm. She refused to acknowledge the intense heat radiating from his heavily scarred torso. "The translation confirms they have already breached the subterranean levels. They are bypassing the standard magical auditing grids by utilizing human transport corridors. The target is not just a rival delegate. They intend to liquidate the entire ruling council during tomorrow's geopolitical assembly." Michael went completely, terrifyingly still. The volatile, exhausting intensity he perpetually carried condensed into a singular, lethal focus. The sovereign ruler within him immediately began calculating the brutal countermeasures required to protect his territory. He turned his head, his face lingering mere inches from hers. The flickering light of the mechanical gas fireplace cast deep, dramatic shadows across his sharp, aristocratic jawline. The raw, preternatural chemistry burning between them was a vastly superior threat to any rogue assassin. "You have provided an invaluable service, Sloane," Michael murmured gently. His large, calloused hand reached out, his thumb slowly brushing a stray strand of glossy black hair away from her pale cheek. The touch was extraordinarily reverent, directly contradicting the brutal violence she had witnessed him unleash in the lobby. Sloane gasped softly, her striking dark eyes widening. Her inner Omega Wolf, usually deeply suspicious of dominant alphas, reacted with an unprecedented, visceral surge of submission and absolute biological safety. She possessed the physical capacity to violently shift and defend herself, yet sitting beside this terrifying enforcer, she felt completely, fundamentally secure. Ninny shattered the excruciating intimacy with a loud, disgruntled yowl. The chunky orange tabby had wedged himself entirely behind Michael's lower back, utilizing the apex predator as a highly efficient, heated backrest. Sloane immediately pulled away, her porcelain cheeks flushing with a sudden, undeniable heat. She aggressively organized her silver-nibbed pen beside her digital tablet to recalibrate her compromised professional boundaries. The linguistic puzzle was nearly solved, but the profound, magnetic pull drawing her toward this mysterious man was proving entirely impossible to mitigate. "We must inform the primary authorities immediately," Sloane stated, clearing her throat to reestablish her bureaucratic armor. "The council must initiate a total lockdown before dawn." "I will handle the lockdown," Michael promised, his whiskey-colored eyes never leaving her face. "No one will breach this suite again." Chapter 8. The gravity of the translated assassination order hung heavily over the opulent suite. Sloane Delaney remained seated on the velvet sofa, bathed in the consistent blue and orange glow of the modern gas fireplace. She stared at the digital tablet, her striking dark eyes analyzing the structural syntax of the archaic cipher. A sudden, cold realization crystallized within her highly analytical mind. "This specific phonetic shifting mechanism," Sloane murmured, her voice losing its cheerful cadence, replaced by a hollow, strained resonance. "I have seen this precise linguistic loophole weaponized before." Michael Caldwell, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees, turned his full, intense attention toward her. His dark, unruly hair fell slightly over his forehead. "Where?" Sloane gripped her silver-nibbed fountain pen, her knuckles turning a stark, absolute white. The emotional trauma she kept meticulously buried beneath layers of bureaucratic red tape surged to the surface. She was a fiercely capable Omega, but the wounds inflicted upon her lineage were profound. 12 years ago, Sloane began, her gaze fixing on the mechanical flames. "My family governed a highly successful, working-class logistics pack. We managed the preternatural trade routes across the southern borders. We were autonomous, peaceful, and entirely independent of the aristocratic hierarchy." Michael's sharp, aristocratic jawline tensed. He recognized the historical timeline she was referencing, and a dark, sickening dread began to pool in his chest. "The elite Lycan nobility desired our lucrative territory," Sloane continued, her voice trembling slightly with deep-rooted anger. "They drafted a boundary treaty. My father, an honorable alpha, signed it in good faith. But the royal scribe intentionally utilized this exact phonetic shift in the High Lycan text. A single mistranslated syllable legally altered the document from a trade agreement into a formal declaration of territorial forfeiture." The suite was submerged in a suffocating, heavy silence. Ninny, sensing the profound distress radiating from his owner, abandoned his heated spot behind Michael and waddled over to Sloane, pressing his chunky orange body against her amethyst trousers. "The Royal Guard did not negotiate," Sloane stated, her expressive eyes flashing with unshed tears and deep, preternatural fury. "They utilized the legal loophole to justify an immediate, violent liquidation. They slaughtered my family. They decimated our pack. I survived because I was young enough to hide, and I swore I would master their archaic laws so completely that no aristocratic alpha could ever exploit a working-class shifter again." Michael felt as though a massive, jagged boulder had been dropped directly onto his chest. The volatile, exhausting intensity he radiated shifted from protective rage to absolute, paralyzing guilt. He was the Lycan King. He had ascended to the sovereign throne shortly after that era of extreme corruption, spending his entire reign attempting to purge the predatory nobles from his court. Yet, the crown he wore, the heavy silver signet ring currently hidden in his tailored blazer, was the exact institution that had systematically eradicated her family. Sloane looked at him, unaware that she was verbally decimating the monarch sitting beside her. That is why I despise the elite hierarchy, Mr. Caldwell. They are arrogant, manipulative tyrants who hide their violence behind legal documents. And this assassin cipher uses the exact same royal linguistic trick. Michael could not speak. His preternatural beast howled in agonizing despair, recognizing that the fated mate it desperately craved fundamentally loathed everything he represented. He looked at her flawlessly pale skin, the indomitable strength she projected despite her catastrophic trauma. He slowly reached out, his large, calloused hand gently covering hers, fully enveloping the silver-nibbed pen. "The hierarchy is deeply flawed," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, gravelly vibration of absolute, unyielding conviction. "But I swear to you, Sloane, the individuals responsible for that linguistic betrayal will be systematically dismantled. You will have your justice." Sloane stared into his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes, entirely mesmerized by the sheer, terrifying weight of his vow. She fundamentally believed he was merely a well-funded security enforcer, utterly oblivious to the fact that the ruling Alpha King had just sworn to tear his own kingdom apart to avenge her. Chapter 9. The formal geopolitical gala commenced on the third evening of the summit, transforming the hotel's cavernous grand ballroom into a dazzling, highly volatile theater of preternatural diplomacy. Sloane Delaney prepared for the mandatory event within the secure perimeter of Suite 402. She ensured Ninny, the remarkably grumpy orange tabby, was adequately supplied with premium culinary provisions before she sequestered him in the bedroom to avoid the corridor's pervasive auditory chaos. Sloane eschewed her standard tailored pantsuits for the evening, instead donning an obscenely expensive, brilliant magenta evening gown. The luxurious silk cascaded flawlessly over her pale skin, the vibrant, jewel-toned fabric creating a striking, indomitable silhouette. She twisted her glossy black hair into an intricate, elegant chignon, exposing the elegant line of her neck. Because she possessed a stubborn refusal to be separated from her vital administrative tools, she packed her heavy digital tablet and the slate gray portable battery pack into a structured, midnight black leather evening tote. She clipped her trusty silver-nibbed fountain pen to the interior lining, fully prepared for any linguistic emergencies. She descended the sweeping marble staircase and entered the grand ballroom. Opulent crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant, fractured illumination over the assembled apex predators. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and the underlying dangerous musk of territorial alphas maneuvering for political dominance. Sloane glided into the room, her signature fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea parting the crowded floor like a physical force. Standing near the perimeter, cloaked in the architectural shadows of a towering marble column, was Michael Caldwell. The undercover monarch wore a sharply tailored, stark black tuxedo that accentuated his broad, uncompromising shoulders. The heavy platinum chronograph watch gleamed conspicuously on his wrist. The absolute second Sloane entered the ballroom, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes locked onto her. The brilliant magenta gown operated as a visual siren, and his feral wolf immediately ceased all auxiliary observations to focus exclusively on his fated mate. Sloane navigated toward a quiet beverage station, successfully evading the arrogant stares of several European delegates. She retrieved a flute of sparkling water, intending to maintain a purely observational role. However, her tranquil isolation was abruptly shattered. Lord Harrington, a notoriously opportunistic Lycan diplomat of white descent, intercepted her. He possessed a calculating, predatory demeanor, his pale eyes tracking her with undisguised avaricious intent. "Ms. Delaney," Harrington purred, stepping profoundly close to her personal perimeter. "A geopolitical translator of your perspicacious caliber rarely graces the ballroom floor. The magenta silk is a highly effective aesthetic choice. I insist you honor me with the first dance of the evening." Sloane maintained a rigid, unyielding posture. She deployed her high-pitched, aggressively polite customer service cadence to obfuscate her internal revulsion. "I profoundly appreciate the invitation, Lord Harrington. However, my contractual obligations strictly prohibit recreational fraternization with active diplomatic delegates. I am currently reviewing classified logistical archives." "The archives can wait," Harrington insisted, reaching out with an obdurate, overconfident presumption to grasp her arm. Before his fingers could graze the magenta silk, the ambient temperature in the immediate vicinity plummeted to a glacial, terrifying degree. Michael materialized directly behind Harrington with a preternatural, lethal stillness. He did not issue a verbal warning. His large, calloused hand clamped onto Harrington's wrist with a bone-crushing, staggering pressure that instantly paralyzed the diplomat. "The lady explicitly declined your invitation," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble of absolute, possessive fury. "Furthermore, she is retained on an exclusive, highly classified security contract. Her schedule is entirely monopolized." Harrington blanched, his arrogant facade completely disintegrating under the sheer, unmitigated terror radiating from the monolithic enforcer. Michael released the diplomat's wrist with a disdainful flick. Harrington hastily retreated, melting into the chaotic crowd without a single word of protest. Sloane stared at Michael, her pulse executing a frantic, irregular tempo. The volatile, exhausting intensity he projected was entirely focused on her. "Your possessive interference was highly unnecessary, Mr. Caldwell. I am fully capable of verbally dismantling an arrogant delegate without requiring an immediate physical extraction." "He was encroaching on your perimeter," Michael countered, his whiskey-colored eyes dropping to the elegant curve of her neck. His preternatural beast was violently agitated, demanding absolute proximity. He stepped forward, seamlessly maneuvering her away from the beverage station. "And we are leaving this exposed floor. I require an immediate, clandestine debriefing." Chapter 10. Michael Caldwell did not wait for Sloane Delaney to grant administrative approval. He placed his large, calloused hand firmly against the lower curve of her spine, the heat of his palm easily penetrating the luxurious magenta silk of her evening gown. He guided her with a ruthless, fluid momentum through the labyrinthine corridors adjacent to the grand ballroom, steering her away from the pervasive, chaotic energy of the summit. He pushed open a heavy mahogany door, ushering her into the hotel's expansive, dimly lit VIP coat room. The clandestine space was lined with velvet-draped racks holding luxurious cashmere overcoats and heavy winter cloaks, creating a muffled, highly insulated acoustic environment. The heavy door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in absolute claustrophobic privacy. Sloane immediately pivoted, her midnight black leather tote swinging against her hip. She utilized her most cheerful, razor-sharp professional tone to combat the overwhelming, deleterious fog of his proximity. "This is an extraordinarily unorthodox venue for a security debriefing, Mr. Caldwell. Unless you have discovered a coded assassination manuscript hidden within a mink trench coat, I suggest we relocate to a properly illuminated administrative office." "The offices are actively monitored by the delegates' surveillance teams," Michael rumbled, taking a deliberate step forward. The coat room was narrow, and his staggering physical dimensions completely dominated the available space. He boxed her in against a row of heavy, dark overcoats, his broad, uncompromising shoulders blocking any potential trajectory of escape. The intoxicating, complex blend of her crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea fragrance swirled aggressively with his own dark, preternatural musk, creating an atmosphere so thick it felt physically heavy. "You are intentionally invading my spatial boundaries," Sloane observed, her striking dark eyes widening as she pressed her back against the soft cashmere garments. Her inner Omega Wolf, entirely contradicting her rigid bureaucratic armor, was vibrating with a profound, visceral submission to his presence. "I am securing my perimeter," Michael corrected, his voice dropping to a dark, gravelly whisper. He leaned forward, bracing his large hands on the wall directly on either side of her head. He was so close, she could feel the steady, powerful rhythm of his breathing. His piercing, whiskey-colored eyes traced the delicate, elegant line of her jaw, lingering with an absolute, possessive obsession on her lips. For a man who ruled a continent with ruthless, cynical authority, the sheer desperation he felt for the petite translator was completely debilitating. "You cannot simply commandeer my evening because a diplomat asked me to dance," Sloane stammered slightly, her formidable professional cadence finally fracturing under the intense, crackling sexual tension. "I can, and I did," Michael murmured. He lowered his face, his lips hovering mere millimeters from hers. The heat radiating from his heavily scarred torso was intense. "No one else is permitted to touch you, Sloane. The thought of Harrington's hands on this silk is entirely unacceptable." Sloane's breath caught in her throat. The sheer, terrifying weight of his devotion obliterated her logical defenses. She possessed a recalcitrant hatred for aristocratic alphas, yet the man currently trapping her in a coat room felt like an impenetrable, luxurious sanctuary. She tilted her chin upward, her dark eyes fluttering shut as she subconsciously yielded to the magnetic, inevitable pull of their preternatural biology. Michael closed the microscopic distance, entirely prepared to claim his fated mate. Instantly, a sharp, highly disruptive vibration shattered the silence. The encrypted matte black satellite phone secured within Michael's tailored tuxedo pocket buzzed with an urgent, high-priority alarm. The mechanical intrusion severed the excruciating intimacy like a physical blade. Michael went rigidly still, his sharp, aristocratic jawline clenching with violent, unmitigated frustration. His feral beast roared in furious protest at the interruption. Sloane gasped, her pale cheeks flushing with a sudden, undeniable heat. She ducked smoothly under his muscular arm, stepping away from the wall to rapidly organize the strap of her midnight black tote. "It appears your security network requires your immediate, undivided attention," Sloane stated, her voice trembling before she aggressively forced it back into a realm of professional detachment. "I will utilize this opportunity to review the hotel's digital archives. Please prioritize your geopolitical crisis, Mr. Caldwell." She exited the coat room with highly coordinated, rapid strides, leaving the undercover monarch to glare murderously at his ringing communication device. Chapter 11. Sloane Delaney required a meticulously organized, tranquil environment to recalibrate her severely compromised neurological state. Fleeing the suffocating intimacy of the coat room, she bypassed the chaotic grand ballroom entirely. She located a secluded administrative alcove situated on the hotel's mezzanine level, bathed in the soft, muted illumination of recessed lighting. She arranged the vibrant magenta silk of her evening gown across a leather armchair, seeking solace in her relentless bureaucratic workload. Opening her midnight black leather evening tote, She retrieved her heavy digital tablet and the high-capacity slate-gray portable battery pack. She securely tethered the devices together, ensuring she maintained an absolute, uninterrupted power supply. Her striking dark eyes focused intensely on the indestructible screen. Earlier that morning, Michael had provided her with the hotel's encrypted master guest ledger, expecting her to cross-reference the archaic Northern Ridge cipher against the official delegate registry. His highly trained, lethal security enforcers had previously scoured the document, utilizing magical detection grids to search for anomalous preternatural signatures. However, they lacked Sloane's perspicacious administrative brilliance. She did not hunt for magic. She hunted for bureaucratic inconsistencies. She utilized her digital interface to overlay the phonetic shifting mechanism she had decoded from the blood-stained assassination manuscript directly onto the hotel's corporate booking logs. Her fingers flew across the screen, systematically auditing thousands of massive financial transactions and room assignments. 15 minutes later, a glaring, catastrophic discrepancy materialized on her screen. "Fascinating," Sloane murmured, a triumphant, razor-sharp smile curving her lips. Heavy, methodical footsteps echoed against the mezzanine's marble floor. Michael Caldwell approached the alcove, his towering frame casting a long, imposing shadow. He had successfully neutralized the communication crisis on his matte black satellite phone, but his whiskey-colored eyes still burned with the residual, frustrated intensity of their interrupted encounter in the coat room. "The perimeter alert was a false positive generated by a malfunctioning sensor," Michael announced, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. He stepped into the alcove, immediately zeroing in on her illuminated screen. "You should be sequestered in Suite 402, not analyzing ledgers in an exposed corridor." "My analysis in this exposed corridor just saved your entire summit," Sloane countered cheerfully, rotating the heavy digital tablet to present her findings. She tapped the screen with her index finger, projecting absolute, indomitable confidence. "Your security personnel scoured this ledger for hostile magical signatures and missed the most obvious, mundane corporate espionage." Michael leaned down, his broad shoulders brushing against hers. He ignored the lingering tension from earlier, his sovereign intellect engaging with the data. "Explain the discrepancy." "The phonetic shift in the assassin's cipher repeatedly referenced a foundation of stone," Sloane explained, her professional veneer fully restored. "Your team assumed it was a metaphor for a magical stronghold. It is not. It is a literal translation of a corporate subsidiary named Lithos Holdings. I audited the hotel's financial routing." She highlighted a massive, blocked reservation. "Lithos Holdings utilized a clandestine shell corporation to secure exclusive, unrestricted access to Sub-Basement 4, an entire floor situated directly beneath the grand ballroom. They paid an obscenely expensive premium to bypass the standard valet and delivery inspections for that specific level." Michael's sharp, aristocratic jawline tightened. The realization hit him with the force of a preternatural shockwave. The rogue syndicate was not infiltrating the summit from the outside. They had administratively purchased the staging ground directly beneath the ruling council's feet. "You found the staging ground," Michael breathed, his voice laced with profound, awestruck reverence. He looked at the petite Omega in the brilliant magenta gown, completely mesmerized by her formidable bureaucratic lethality. "My entire intelligence network failed, and you dismantled their operation with a spreadsheet." "Never underestimate the power of an aggressive audit," Sloane replied sweetly, shutting down her tablet. "I highly suggest you dispatch your enforcers to Sub-Basement 4 immediately, Mr. Caldwell. The summit's survival is currently dependent on your prompt logistical response. Chapter 12. Following the immediate clandestine dispatch of his elite security enforcers to Sub-Basement 4, Michael Caldwell personally escorted Sloane Delaney back to the impenetrable sanctuary of the West Wing. They reached the pristine, newly installed heavy oak door of Suite 402. Sloane engaged her keycard, and the reinforced deadbolt retracted with a satisfying, heavy click. Upon entering the deeply shadowed suite, they were immediately greeted by an indignant, highly judgmental yowl. Ninny, the remarkably grumpy orange tabby, abandoned his post on the velvet sofa and aggressively waddled over to rub his chunky body against Michael's dark tuxedo trousers. Sloane ignored the traitorous feline. She marched directly to the wall and precisely twisted the sleek metal dial controlling the modern gas fireplace. The mechanical appliance instantly roared to life, casting a flawless, steady illumination of blue and warm orange flames across the thick Persian rug. The purely mechanical nature of the heat source provided a comforting, logical consistency to the room. She placed her midnight black leather evening tote onto the mahogany desk, turning to face the monolithic man occupying her space. "Your administrative prowess averted a geopolitical catastrophe tonight," Michael stated, his voice a dark, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the quiet suite. He stepped closer, the flickering firelight casting dramatic shadows across his broad, uncompromising shoulders. "The Syndicate's armory has been successfully neutralized. I owe you a profound debt of gratitude." "My services are adequately compensated by my premium hourly rate," Sloane replied, deploying her cheerful, razor-sharp professionalism to keep her erratic pulse concealed beneath the magenta silk. "Your hourly rate is insufficient for saving a continent," Michael countered. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket, carefully avoiding the hidden silver royal signet ring, and withdrew a sleek, elongated velvet box. He extended it toward her. "Consider this a supplementary bonus for exceptional logistical execution." Sloane's striking dark eyes narrowed with intense analytical scrutiny. She reached out, accepting the velvet box. She snapped the lid open. Resting on a bed of dark satin was a meticulously crafted, exquisitely heavy fountain pen. Sloane lifted the instrument, instantly recognizing the staggering density and absolute purity of the metal. It was not silver, nor was it standard surgical steel. It was forged entirely from solid platinum. The barrel featured intricate, archaic Lycan runes etched with microscopic precision, and the nib was a flawless, custom-designed masterpiece. It was an item of such luxurious, unparalleled craftsmanship that it was obscenely expensive. Sloane gripped the platinum pen, her perspicacious mind rapidly processing the variables. She looked up, her gaze dropping instinctively to Michael's left wrist. The heavy platinum chronograph watch gleaming against his dark cuff was forged from the exact same rare, incredibly costly metal. The visual synergy between the two items was undeniable. A profound, chilling realization cascaded through her highly organized brain. A standard security enforcer, regardless of their discretionary budget or mercenary success, could never casually afford uniquely crafted, custom-forged platinum writing implements as a spontaneous bonus. An item of this magnitude represented absolute, unfathomable wealth. It was the type of wealth hoarded exclusively by the aristocratic nobility. "This is fundamentally illogical," Sloane murmured, her customer service facade completely fracturing. She stepped back, clutching the platinum pen, her pale skin contrasting sharply with the magenta gown. The financial liquidity required to procure this item vastly exceeds any conceivable security payroll. Michael remained perfectly still. His piercing, whiskey-colored eyes tracked her escalating suspicion, his feral wolf bracing for the inevitable fallout. "I possess highly diversified assets, Sloane." "No," Sloane stated, her voice trembling with profound anger and a sickening dread. "You authorized an instantaneous, exorbitant bank transfer on my first night here. You command elite guards with a single glance. And now, you casually distribute platinum artifacts. You are not the head of security." The suite fell into a suffocating, heavy silence, broken only by the steady hiss of the mechanical gas fireplace. Sloane stared at the terrifying, volatile man standing in her living room, her preternatural omega instincts warring violently against her traumatic history. The protective enforcer who made her feel absolutely safe was systematically dissolving, replaced by the terrifying specter of the elite hierarchy she had sworn to despise. Chapter 13. Sloane Delaney's striking dark eyes remained immutably fixed upon the solid platinum pen resting in her delicate palm. The immense, undeniably luxurious weight of the writing instrument served as a tangible confirmation of her escalating dread. The modern gas fireplace continued its flawless, mechanically regulated output of blue and warm orange flames, casting dramatic, shifting illumination across the thick Persian rug. Yet, the ambient warmth utterly failed to mitigate the glacial, terrifying realization rapidly proliferating through her veins. She slowly lifted her gaze from the platinum artifact to the monolithic apex predator occupying her suite. "You possess highly diversified assets," Sloane repeated, her voice remarkably devoid of its usual cheerful, customer service cadence. The words emerged hollow, strained by the colossal weight of her deductive reasoning. "A standard security operative does not diversify into custom-forged, archaic, Lycan-inscribed platinum. That level of liquidity is exclusively sequestered within the aristocratic nobility. Who exactly are you, Mr. Caldwell?" Michael Caldwell did not flinch. His broad, uncompromising shoulders remained rigidly tense beneath his sharply tailored, stark black tuxedo. The volatile, exhausting intensity he habitually projected had coalesced into a suffocating, defensive posture. His preternatural beast was violently agitated, recognizing that the fragile trust he had meticulously cultivated with his fated mate was actively fracturing. "My identity is a geopolitical necessity, Sloane," Michael murmured, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that resonated deep within his heavily scarred chest. The syndicate infiltration required an undercover operative possessing absolute, unquestioned authority to bypass the territorial delegates. The suffocating tension within Suite 402 caused the ambient temperature to feel unbearably oppressive. Michael exhaled a harsh, jagged breath. Seeking a microscopic fraction of physical relief, he aggressively shrugged off his stark black tuxedo jacket. He tossed the ridiculously expensive garment onto the plush velvet sofa, remaining in his crisp white dress shirt and dark trousers. The sudden, rapid movement immediately captured the attention of Ninny. The remarkably grumpy, exceptionally chunky, orange tabby cat possessed a furious disdain for ignored boundaries. Believing the discarded tuxedo jacket was a newly designated feline bed, Ninny launched his heavy body onto the velvet cushions. He began to aggressively burrow and knead his paws into the dark fabric, vigorously investigating the interior lining. "I do not accept vague, bureaucratic obfuscation," Sloane countered, her pale fingers tightening around the platinum pen. She took a deliberate step backward, the brilliant magenta silk of her evening gown rustling against the carpet. You utilized your position to sequester me. You authorized instantaneous bank transfers that bypassed coalition auditing. You... A sharp, metallic clatter abruptly severed her accusation. Ninny's vigorous excavation of the tuxedo jacket had successfully dislodged a heavy object from the concealed inner pocket. A massive, intricately forged ring tumbled out of the dark fabric, bouncing solidly against the glass coffee table before rolling onto the pristine Persian rug. It came to a definitive halt precisely between Sloane's bare feet and Michael's polished leather shoes. The suite plummeted into a horrifying, absolute silence. Sloane looked down. Her perspicacious, highly analytical mind instantly registered the visual data. It was not a generic piece of jewelry. It was a heavy, silver signet ring. The top of the ring was deeply engraved with a highly specific, archaic crest, a snarling wolf entwined with a crown of thorns. It was the sovereign crest of the Lycan King. The oxygen seemingly evaporated from the room. The exact same crest had been stamped in dark, unforgiving wax at the bottom of the mistranslated boundary treaty 12 years ago. It was the absolute, undeniable seal of the monarch whose ruling class had systematically slaughtered her family and liquidated her working-class logistics pack. Sloane's breath hitched, a sharp, ragged sound of pure, unmitigated devastation. She stumbled back, her striking dark eyes wide with a horrific recognition. She stared at the man who had intoxicatingly invaded her personal perimeter. The man whose preternatural scent had inexplicably made her inner Omega feel fundamentally, unequivocally secure. "You," Sloane whispered, the single syllable trembling with a profound, agonizing betrayal. The bureaucratic armor she utilized to survive completely disintegrated. "You are not an enforcer. You are the king." Michael stood frozen, his piercing whiskey-colored eyes locked onto her pale, devastated face. He made no attempt to retrieve the heavy silver signet ring from the floor. He could not deny the empirical evidence resting at her feet. The catastrophic revelation he had desperately attempted to delay had finally materialized, and the subsequent fallout was proving to be infinitely more destructive than any rogue assassin's blade. Chapter 14. "Sloane, listen to me," Michael Caldwell commanded, his voice vibrating with a dark, desperate urgency. He took a deliberate step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. The sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt strained against his formidable musculature, but his imposing physical dominance offered absolutely no intimidation against her profound fury. "Do not breach my perimeter!" Sloane shouted, her voice completely stripped of its aggressive, polite professionalism. She retreated until the back of her legs collided with the mahogany desk. Her hands frantically searched the surface, her fingers blindly locking around her heavy digital tablet and the slate-gray portable battery pack. She shoved the devices, along with her trusty silver-nibbed fountain pen, into her midnight black leather evening tote, deliberately leaving the newly gifted solid platinum pen resting on the polished wood as a tangible symbol of her rejection. Her movements were chaotic, driven by the sheer visceral instinct to flee the oppressive epicenter of her trauma. "You deliberately manipulated my employment contract under entirely fraudulent pretenses," Sloane accused, her expressive dark eyes blazing with unshed tears and ferocious indignation. She aggressively organized the strap of her tote over her shoulder, utilizing the physical action to anchor her spiraling neurology. "You stood in this exact room, listening to me recount the systemic eradication of my pack, and you offered me hollow, hypocritical platitudes while carrying the sovereign seal of their executioners in your pocket." Michael's aristocratic jawline clenched with obdurate, unyielding tension. "I ascended to the throne immediately following that era of aristocratic corruption. I spent the last decade systematically purging the elite nobility who authorized that slaughter. I did not order the liquidation of your family, Sloane." "But you represent the institution that did," Sloane fired back, her brilliant magenta gown swishing violently as she paced behind the desk. "You are the apex predator of the exact hierarchy I swore to despise. You utilized your staggering wealth to purchase my compliance. You let me treat you like a subordinate security operative because you found my ignorance amusing. I allowed you to dictate the parameters because it was the only methodology that kept you in my proximity," Michael countered, his preternatural beast roaring against the agonizing separation. He closed the distance to the desk, his hands planting firmly on the polished wood. "My sovereign title would have driven you away instantly. I needed your linguistic expertise to neutralize the syndicate, yes. But more importantly, I required you." Sloane stared at him, profoundly repulsed by his arrogant justification. "You do not simply acquire human beings to fulfill your geopolitical or biological demands, Your Majesty. I am a fiercely independent contractor. I am not a royal acquisition." She reached fiercely into her packed tote and retrieved her silver-nibbed fountain pen, snatching a crisp piece of hotel stationery from the mahogany desk. Her pale fingers trembled with righteous anger as she furiously scribbled a legally binding termination notice, aggressively slamming the paper back onto the polished wood before dropping the pen back into her bag. "This constitutes my formal, immediate resignation," Sloane declared, her tone sharp and uncompromising. "I am officially terminating my linguistic contract with this summit. The archaic Northern Ridge cipher has been successfully translated. You possess the location of a Lithos Holdings staging ground. My professional utility is entirely exhausted." Michael stared down at the handwritten note. The volatile, exhausting intensity he perpetually carried condensed into a singular, dark obsession. "I do not accept your resignation. You are an integral component of this security operation. The syndicate knows you possess the translation matrix. Leaving this fortified suite exposes you to unacceptable, lethal variables." "My physical security is my own responsibility," Sloane retorted, her inner Omega Wolf surging toward the surface, highly eager to manifest and tear her way out of the room if necessary. She possessed the fluid, visceral capacity to shift, and she absolutely refused to remain caged with the monarch of her enemies. "I will retrieve my vehicle from the valet and vacate this territory immediately. Do not attempt to impede my departure, or I will file a formal grievance that will spectacularly humiliate your administration." She bypassed the desk, moving purposefully toward the heavy oak door. She ignored Ninny, who was currently sniffing the discarded silver signet ring with feline disdain. She reached for the reinforced deadbolt, entirely prepared to abandon the opulent hotel, the overwhelming compensation, and the terrifying magnetic pull of the Lycan King. Chapter 15. Sloane Delaney's pale fingers grasped the heavy brass latch of the reinforced deadbolt. Before she could disengage the locking mechanism, a large, calloused hand slammed flat against the pristine oak door, positioned directly above her head. The concussive force of the impact rattled the frame, immediately halting her trajectory. Michael Caldwell loomed entirely over her, his broad, uncompromising shoulders effectively barricading the exit. The heat radiating from his chest easily penetrated the brilliant magenta silk of her evening gown. The intoxicating, complex blend of her crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea fragrance was actively warring with the dark, highly agitated musk of his preternatural dominance. "Remove your hand from this architecture immediately," Sloane demanded, deploying her polished corporate pitch as a desperate, final shield. She refused to look up into his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes, focusing instead on the starched collar of his white dress shirt. "Restricting the movement of a contracted civilian constitutes a gross violation of interterritorial law. I will add unlawful detainment to your impending administrative invoice." "You are not leaving this room, Sloane," Michael stated, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that resonated with absolute, sovereign authority. He did not yield a single fraction of an inch. His feral wolf was in a state of absolute panic, fundamentally incapable of allowing his newly discovered fated mate to wander into an active war zone. "The Syndicate is currently mobilized in the subterranean levels. Your translation explicitly detailed a siege. If you step into that corridor, you become a primary, highly valuable target." "I am a fully capable Omega Wolf," Sloane countered, her dark eyes flashing with indomitable fury as she finally tilted her head to glare at him. "I can fluidly shift and systematically dismantle any rogue operative that crosses my perimeter. I do not require the protection of the Crown." "I am entirely aware of your lethal capabilities," Michael murmured, his gaze dropping momentarily to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. "But I will not permit you to engage in a physical altercation when I possess the vast resources to secure your safety. You are sequestered." Sloane let out a sound of profound, unmitigated frustration. "You cannot simply declare a sequestration because my departure inconveniences your possessive neurology." Without breaking eye contact, Michael reached into the pocket of his dark trousers with his free hand. He retrieved his encrypted matte black satellite phone. His thumb rapidly navigated the highly classified interface. He pressed a singular glowing red icon. "Initiate Protocol Alpha," Michael commanded into the device, his tone stripped of any residual cynicism, leaving only the terrifying, ruthless cadence of a military commander. "Execute a total, absolute lockdown of the summit perimeter. No unauthorized personnel are permitted to enter or exit the West Wing. All exterior access points are to be magically sealed and physically barricaded. Lethal force is authorized against any unverified preternatural signatures." He lowered the phone, the screen verifying the instantaneous execution of his orders. Far below them, the muffled, heavy thud of colossal security blast doors engaging reverberated through the hotel's structural foundation. The high-decibel wail of a perimeter alarm briefly echoed before being systematically silenced by the administrative override. "The hotel is sealed," Michael announced, leaning slightly closer, his presence utterly suffocating. "Your highly reliable silver compact sedan is currently locked behind a reinforced subterranean barricade. You could successfully shift and tear through a dozen rogue alphas, Sloane, but you cannot bypass a sovereign military lockdown." Sloane stared at him, her chest heaving against the tight silk of her magenta gown. The midnight black leather tote slipped slightly off her shoulder. She was fundamentally trapped. The bureaucratic red tape she usually wielded to control the apex predators had been entirely obliterated by a display of absolute, insurmountable royal power. "You are a manipulative, arrogant tyrant," Sloane whispered, her voice shaking with a potent mixture of deep-seated anger and undeniable, terrifying attraction. "I am," Michael agreed softly, the admission carrying zero remorse. He slowly lowered his arm from the door, but he did not step back. "I will gladly accept your hatred, Sloane, provided you remain alive to deliver it. You will stay in this suite, and you will stay safe." Chapter 16. The atmosphere within Suite 402 was highly pressurized, mimicking the stifling environment preceding a catastrophic preternatural storm. Sloane Delaney retreated to the center of the Persian rug, aggressively organizing the strap of her midnight black leather tote. She refused to engage in further verbal sparring with the obdurate monarch standing by the door. The mechanical gas fireplace continued its steady, flawless combustion, completely oblivious to the geopolitical siege occurring outside the heavily draped windows. Michael Caldwell remained near the entrance, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes continuously scanning the perimeter. The heavy platinum chronograph watch on his wrist ticked with a precise, unrelenting rhythm. He was operating on a razor-thin margin of control, his feral beast fiercely agitated by the proximate threat to his mate. Suddenly, the encrypted matte black satellite phone in his hand vibrated with a sharp, discordant frequency. Michael lifted the device, his sharp, aristocratic jawline clenching as he read the incoming tactical transmission. "My elite enforcers have breached Sub-Basement 4. They are actively engaging the Lithos Holdings Syndicate armory." He paused, his gaze darkening with profound, lethal concern. However, a splinter faction of rogue alphas successfully bypassed the secondary magical auditing grid before the lockdown fully engaged. They are utilizing the service elevators. Sloane's highly analytical mind instantly processed the logistical trajectory. The service elevators provide direct, unrestricted access to the West Wing corridors. They are coming for the translation archives. "They are coming for you," Michael corrected, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble of absolute fury. He strode across the Persian rug, smoothly retrieving the heavy silver signet ring that Ninny had abandoned on the floor and securing it deep within the pocket of his dark trousers, leaving his hands entirely free for combat. "I must intercept the splinter faction in the primary corridor to prevent them from establishing a staging ground near this suite," Michael commanded, his tone leaving absolutely zero room for bureaucratic negotiation. He looked directly at Sloane. "I will hold the perimeter outside. You will engage the reinforced deadbolt the absolute second I cross the threshold. Do not open this door under any circumstances." Sloane's preternatural omega instincts flared, a sudden, inexplicable surge of anxiety gripping her chest at the thought of him stepping into an active ambush alone. She fiercely suppressed the emotion, relying on her indomitable professional armor. "I am entirely capable of maintaining a secure lockdown, Mr. Caldwell. Please ensure you do not inadvertently damage the architecture during your physical altercation." Michael offered a fleeting, cynical smirk, completely mesmerized by her unyielding sass, even in the face of imminent violence. He slipped through the doorway, disappearing into the dimly lit hallway. Sloane instantly slammed the heavy oak door shut. She twisted the brass locking mechanism, the reinforced deadbolt engaging with a definitive, heavy click. She turned rapidly, her striking dark eyes scanning the opulent suite. She immediately grasped Ninny, ignoring the orange tabby's indignant yowl, and shoved the chunky feline securely into his ventilated travel carrier beneath the mahogany desk. She dropped her midnight black tote onto the velvet sofa, ensuring her heavy digital tablet and slate-gray battery pack were safely cushioned. The corridor outside fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. Then, the muffled, visceral sounds of preternatural violence began to echo through the thick wood of the door. The bone-cracking thuds of immense physical impacts, followed by guttural, aggressive snarls that vibrated the floorboards. Michael was actively engaging the threat. Sloane stepped back, her bare feet silent against the Persian rug. The ambient scent of damp earth and rusted iron, the unmistakable olfactory signature of hostile, rogue shifters, began to seep through the microscopic gaps in the doorframe. Suddenly, a massive, concussive impact slammed directly against her door. The heavy oak shuddered violently. The syndicate operatives had bypassed the primary engagement and found the target. A second, more devastating blow struck the wood near the lock. The reinforced deadbolt groaned, the metal visibly straining under the staggering, preternatural force of multiple alphas attempting to breach the perimeter. Sloane did not scream. She did not reach for her silver-nibbed pen. She closed her eyes, inhaling a deep breath of the spiced white tea and crushed pomegranate fragrance in the room. Her pulse synchronized with the rapid, violent pounding at the door. She concentrated on the lethal, latent energy humming beneath her pale skin, entirely prepared to initiate a visceral, bone-cracking metamorphosis. If the door failed, the assassins would not find a fragile human translator. They would find a vicious, fully capable Omega Wolf. Chapter 17. The suffocating tension inside Suite 402 reached a volatile, inescapable crescendo. Sloane Delaney stood rooted to the center of the Persian rug, her striking dark eyes locked onto the heavy oak door. The pristine, newly installed wood was currently buckling under a sequence of concussive, preternatural impacts. The reinforced deadbolt, a mechanism designed to withstand standard force, screeched in agonizing metallic protest. Outside, the guttural snarls of the lithos-holding splinter faction echoed with inimical, bloodthirsty intent. They were hunting the translator, assuming they would find a fragile, defenseless academic cowering behind bureaucratic red tape. They were catastrophically mistaken. With a final, deafening crack, the reinforced deadbolt sheared completely off its mounting. The heavy oak door splintered inward, the violent debris scattering across the opulent carpet. The law of physical causality dictated the suite's perimeter was once again catastrophically breached. 3 massive, heavily muscled alphas of white descent surged through the ruined entryway, their eyes glowing with predatory malice, their hands elongated into lethal, elongated claws. Sloane did not hesitate, nor did she issue a cheerful customer service reprimand. The instant the first assassin crossed the threshold, she surrendered entirely to her latent, preternatural biology. The metamorphosis was instantaneous and viscerally violent. An overwhelming surge of somatic energy flooded her physiology, initiating the rapid, bone-cracking realignment of her skeletal structure. The obscenely expensive, brilliant magenta silk evening gown could not accommodate the sudden, explosive expansion of muscle and sinew. The luxurious fabric was ruthlessly shredded into ruined, vibrant ribbons, falling to the floor alongside her abandoned professional facade. In a fraction of a second, the petite linguist was entirely eradicated. In her place stood a sleek, formidable Omega Wolf. Her coat was a striking, luminous silver, gleaming under the steady, mechanically regulated blue and warm orange illumination of the gas fireplace. She possessed a terrifying, agile lethality, her dark, perspicacious eyes evaluating the 3 intruders with absolute, unmitigated calculation. The lead alpha halted, experiencing a profound, visceral shock at the sight of the silver wolf. His cognitive delay proved fatal. Sloane launched herself forward with an aerodynamic, staggering velocity. She bypassed his initial clumsy strike entirely, her powerful jaws locking directly onto his exposed forearm. She utilized the assailant's own forward momentum, planting her paws and violently twisting her powerful neck to drag his massive frame off balance, sending him crashing heavily into the mahogany desk. The heavy furniture shuddered, but Ninny, safely secured within the ventilated travel carrier beneath it, merely issued an irritated, muffled hiss. The remaining 2 syndicate operatives recovered from their initial stupefaction and attacked simultaneously in a coordinated pincer movement. Sloane exhibited an unparalleled surgical efficacy in her combat strategy. She evaded a lethal swipe from the second alpha by dropping low to the Persian rug, twisting her silver body with acrobatic precision to slash her claws across his supporting ligaments. As he collapsed with a howl of agony, she pivoted, utilizing her powerful hind legs to deliver a devastating, concussive kick directly to the third operative's sternum. The impact propelled him backward, his skull colliding solidly against the structural frame of the ruined doorway. The altercation concluded with startling, brutal celerity. The opulent suite, previously a sanctuary of bureaucratic order, was now a chaotic battlefield littered with shredded magenta silk, shattered wood, and 3 incapacitated apex predators. Sloane stood in the center of the carnage, her silver chest heaving as she expended the massive caloric energy required to sustain her preternatural form. She released a low, dominant growl, establishing absolute territorial supremacy over the defeated syndicate assassins, entirely unbothered by the violence she had just orchestrated. Chapter 18. The corridor outside Suite 402 was a theater of absolute, unmitigated devastation. Yet Michael Caldwell had successfully neutralized the primary ambush. The Lycan King strode purposefully toward his mate's quarters, his crisp, white dress shirt stained with the blood of his adversaries, his dark trousers torn at the knee. His preternatural beast was operating in a state of frantic, terrified agitation. He had heard the reinforced deadbolt shatter. He anticipated finding Sloane cornered, relying desperately on the protective perimeter he had failed to secure. He stepped through the jagged, ruined framework of the oak door, his whiskey-colored eyes sweeping the immediate vicinity. The visual data his brain received entirely dismantled his sovereign assumptions. Sloane Delaney was not cowering. Instead, a magnificent, luminous silver omega wolf stood triumphantly over the incapacitated bodies of 3 massive syndicate alphas. The floor was strewn with the shredded, vibrant remnants of her brilliant magenta evening gown. The mechanical gas fireplace continued its flawless, steady combustion, casting warm, flickering light across her sleek, powerful form. She turned her striking dark eyes toward Michael, exuding an aura of lethal, indomitable autonomy. Michael halted, a profound, awe-struck reverence washing over his heavily scarred physiology. He had fundamentally believed that his fated mate required his extensive security apparatus to survive the geopolitical crossfire. He was abruptly, undeniably confronted with the reality that Sloane was an apex predator in her own right. She possessed the capacity to systematically dismantle a specialized assassination squad without breaking her administrative composure. She never needed a royal enforcer. She solely required the biological anchor of their mating bond. Recognizing the immediate threat was neutralized, Sloane initiated the rapid, bone-cracking reversal of her metamorphosis. The silver wolf dissolved, her skeletal structure contracting with fluid precision until she returned to her pale, flawless human form. She knelt amidst the ruined magenta silk, profoundly exhausted by the colossal caloric expenditure her biology had just demanded. Michael immediately averted his gaze to afford her absolute privacy, his sharp, aristocratic jawline clenched with protective intensity. He reached out blindly, snatching a plush cashmere throw blanket from the back of the velvet sofa. He tossed the heavy fabric precisely toward her location. "Your efficiency is staggering," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble, as Sloane hastily wrapped the heavy cashmere around her slender frame. She stood up, her dark eyes flashing with a fierce, unyielding fury that entirely eclipsed the adrenaline of the physical altercation. "My efficiency is a byproduct of surviving the systemic slaughter your aristocratic hierarchy orchestrated, Your Majesty." Michael turned to face her, the royal title slicing through the air with caustic precision. "Sloane, I did not know you possessed the capacity to shift. I would never have forced you into a localized lockdown if I understood your defensive capabilities." "My capabilities are irrelevant to the fact that you manipulated my presence here under fraudulent pretenses," Sloane retorted, her voice devoid of its cheerful, unaffected cadence. She walked over to the mahogany desk, her bare feet stepping carefully over an unconscious operative. She crouched down, peering into the ventilated travel carrier to ensure Ninny was unharmed. "You utilized your sovereign wealth to buy my proximity while wearing the signet ring of my family's executioners." "I am the king who purged those executioners," Michael countered, stepping closer, desperately attempting to bridge the vast, emotional chasm separating them. "My beast recognized you the moment I breached this suite. I concealed my identity because I knew the crest would drive you away before I could prove my loyalty." "Your deception has exclusively proven your capacity for manipulation," Sloane stated, her posture rigid and impenetrable. "The syndicate threat is neutralized. My linguistic contract is concluded. I am departing this territory, and you will not impede my exit." Chapter 19. The subsequent morning illuminated a Summit hotel in absolute administrative shambles. The total lockdown of Protocol Alpha was officially rescinded at dawn, replaced by a chaotic influx of territorial police and specialized magical auditing units. The subterranean staging ground of Lithos Holdings had been entirely dismantled, and the surviving syndicate operatives were currently undergoing rigorous interrogation. The aristocratic delegates, thoroughly humiliated by the security breach, remained sequestered in the grand ballroom under sovereign guard. Sloane Delaney had spent the agonizing overnight hours in a tense standoff, waiting for the lockdown to lift while Michael's guards cleared the unconscious assassins from her suite. Now, she utilized the pervasive morning confusion to execute her departure with flawless, bureaucratic precision. She stood within the ruined perimeter of Suite 402, dressed in a sharp, immaculately tailored deep burgundy blazer and crisp-tailored trousers. Her flawless pale skin betrayed a profound, deleterious exhaustion, yet her movements were highly organized. She zipped up her rolling luggage, then verified the contents of her already packed midnight black leather evening tote, ensuring her heavy digital tablet, the slate gray portable battery pack, and her trusty silver-nibbed fountain pen were securely stowed. After a brief hesitation, she retrieved the solid platinum pen from the mahogany desk, the obscenely expensive artifact she had previously rejected, and dropped it into the tote's interior pocket. She coaxed Ninny back into his ventilated travel carrier, securing the latch. The chunky orange tabby remained unusually silent, perhaps sensing the severe, deep-seated sorrow radiating beneath his owner's professional armor. Grasping the handle of her rolling luggage in one hand and the carrier in the other, Sloane bypassed the shattered oak door and navigated the labyrinthine corridors. She encountered several elite royal enforcers, but her high-pitched, aggressively polite customer service cadence operated as an impenetrable shield. She simply flashed her expired linguistic contract and cited Article 9 of the Diplomatic Evacuation Clause, seamlessly walking through the security cordons without triggering a single physical detainment. She reached the valet roundabout, bypassing the ostentatious, flashy sports cars belonging to the delayed delegates. She presented her digital retrieval ticket to a highly flustered attendant, and moments later, her highly reliable, slightly dented, silver compact sedan was driven up from the subterranean lot. She aggressively shoved her luggage into the trunk, secured Ninny's carrier in the passenger seat, and placed her midnight black tote securely in the footwell. As she ignited the modest engine, a profound, chilling emptiness settled into her chest. The luxurious, intoxicating fragrance of spiced white tea and crushed pomegranate filled the cabin, but the absence of Michael's dark, preternatural musk was agonizing. Her inner Omega Wolf howled in silent, devastating protest at the deliberate separation from its fated mate. Sloane gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning stark white as she aggressively suppressed the biological imperative to return to his side. She shifted the transmission into drive and navigated down the winding, meticulously manicured driveway. The sky above was a lugubrious, bruised charcoal, threatening an imminent torrential downpour. She had successfully preserved her independence, evading the manipulative gravity of the Lycan King and the aristocratic hierarchy she fundamentally despised. Yet, as the opulent Summit Hotel vanished in her rear-view mirror, the victory felt entirely hollow. She had utilized her administrative brilliance to survive, but she was actively driving away from the singular individual who made her feel unequivocally, viscerally safe. Sloane pressed the accelerator, determined to put as much geographical distance between herself and her trauma as her silver sedan could manage before the impending storm broke. Chapter 20. The bruised charcoal sky rapidly fulfilled its ominous promise, unleashing a torrential, aggressive deluge upon the winding mountain highway. Sloane Delaney gripped the steering wheel of her silver compact sedan, her striking dark eyes squinting through the rain-battered windshield. The mechanical wipers operated at maximum velocity, yet visibility remained catastrophically poor. The slick asphalt reflected the ambient gray light, creating a treacherous, highly hazardous driving environment. She had been driving for exactly 2 hours, utilizing the repetitive, mundane logistics of navigation to compartmentalize her escalating emotional distress. Ninny, entirely dissatisfied with the vehicular vibrations, issued a continuous, judgmental yowl from his ventilated carrier. "I am fully aware the meteorological conditions are suboptimal, Ninny," Sloane murmured, her customer service cadence fracturing into a strained, vulnerable whisper. "We will secure dry, uncompromised lodging shortly." Suddenly, a blinding flash of high-intensity headlights pierced the deluge in her rearview mirror. Sloane's pulse accelerated, her preternatural instincts flaring with sudden, visceral intensity. She analyzed the approaching vehicle's trajectory. It was not a standard commuter. It was a preternaturally fast, aggressively engineered machine closing the distance with terrifying, explosive celerity. Through the cascading rain, the silhouette of a custom, matte crimson Grand Tourer materialized. The vehicle possessed an intimidating, predatory aesthetic, its wide chassis dominating the narrow mountain lane. The Grand Tourer surged forward, effortlessly overtaking her silver sedan. With a ruthless, highly calculated maneuver, the crimson vehicle veered sharply, positioning its broad metallic flank entirely across the wet asphalt, forming an impenetrable vehicular barricade. Sloane slammed her foot onto the brake pedal. The anti-lock brakes engaged with a violent, jarring shudder. The silver compact sedan skidded aggressively across the slick surface, the tires screeching a high-decibel protest before lurching to a definitive halt a mere 3 feet from the Grand Tourer's broad metallic chassis. The ensuing silence within the cabin was absolute, save for the furious drumming of the precipitation against the roof. The driver's side door of the matte crimson vehicle swung open. Michael Caldwell stepped out into the raging tempest. He had discarded his torn diplomatic attire, now wearing a simple, stark black shirt and dark trousers. The torrential rain instantly saturated the fabric, plastering the dark material against his broad, uncompromising shoulders and the heavily scarred musculature of his torso. He ignored the freezing downpour entirely. He moved with a predatory stillness, crossing the slick asphalt with a terrifying, inexorable momentum. His dark, unruly hair was plastered to his forehead, and his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes were locked immutably onto her windshield. Sloane's breath hitched, the sheer, staggering force of his presence obliterating her bureaucratic defenses. The Lycan King had not dispatched elite enforcers to retrieve a rogue contractor. He had personally pursued his fated mate into a storm. Michael reached the driver's side door of her sedan. He did not attempt to shatter the glass or exhibit lethal aggression. He simply placed his large, calloused hands flat against the rain-streaked window, leaning down so his sharp, aristocratic jawline was level with hers. The volatile, exhausting intensity he radiated demanded absolute, unyielding attention. Sloane hesitated, her pale fingers hovering over the electronic window control. Her logical mind screamed to initiate a reverse maneuver and flee, but her inner Omega completely capitulated to the preternatural bond. With a trembling hand, she lowered the glass precisely 3 inches, allowing the frigid, damp air to rush into the cabin, immediately followed by his dark, intoxicating scent. "You cannot simply establish a vehicular blockade on a public thoroughfare," Sloane stated, desperately attempting to deploy her professional sass against the overwhelming reality of his devotion. "I can," Michael rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that easily cut through the acoustic chaos of the storm. "I am the king, and I absolutely refuse to let you drive away." Chapter 21. The torrential deluge battered the roof of Sloane Delaney's silver compact sedan with a deafening, aggressive rhythm. She sat frozen in the driver's seat, her knuckles stark white against the steering wheel. Through the narrow 3-inch gap in her window, the frigid rain sprayed across the tailored lapel of her deep burgundy blazer. Directly outside, standing immutably in the tempest, was Michael Caldwell. The Lycan King's dark shirt was completely saturated, adhering tightly to his heavily scarred torso. Yet he exuded a preternatural heat that actively warred with the storm. "Your sovereign title does not grant you the authority to detain an independent contractor on a public highway," Sloane stated, her professional voice entirely fractured, revealing raw, unmitigated vulnerability. "You represent the geopolitical entity that authorized the liquidation of my pack. I cannot simply ignore a decade of systemic trauma because your preternatural biology demands my proximity." Michael did not flinch, though her words violently lacerated his feral beast. He maintained his firm grip on the rain-streaked edge of her window. The volatile, exhausting intensity he radiated was entirely focused on dismantling the formidable bureaucratic walls she utilized for survival. "I ascended the throne in the immediate aftermath of that slaughter, Sloane," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, resonant rumble. "The aristocratic council that utilized that mistranslated treaty to decimate your family believed I would be a compliant, malleable figurehead. They were catastrophically mistaken. I spent the last 10 years systematically dismantling their influence, executing the corrupt lords, and completely rewriting the territorial mandates. Rewriting a mandate does not resurrect a logistics pack, Sloane countered fiercely, a single hot tear escaping her dark eyes. Michael's aristocratic jawline tightened. He understood that verbal assurances were entirely insufficient. She required absolute logistical proof of his devotion. Without breaking eye contact, Michael reached into the pocket of his soaked dark trousers. He retrieved his encrypted, matte black satellite phone. The highly advanced device remained flawlessly operational, despite the torrential downpour. He engaged the biometric security lock and initiated a direct, high-priority transmission to the summit's central administrative core. "Connect me to the remaining Council of Elders," Michael commanded into the device, his tone carrying the absolute, terrifying cadence of a ruling monarch. A tinny, frantic voice echoed from the speaker. "Your Majesty, the delegates are currently sequestered. Put them on the primary frequency," Michael interrupted ruthlessly. A moment later, the collective, nervous breathing of the aristocratic elites filled the connection. "Hear me," Michael projected his voice, ensuring Sloane could clearly hear every syllable over the storm. "Effective immediately, the archaic territorial acquisition clause, specifically the phonetic translation loophole utilized to liquidate the Southern Logistics Pact 12 years ago, is formally, completely dissolved. The royal decree that authorized their execution is retroactively annulled. All confiscated assets, territories, and financial holdings are to be instantaneously restored to the sole surviving heir, Sloane Delaney." Sloane gasped, her breath catching painfully in her throat. Her striking dark eyes widened in absolute, profound shock. "Furthermore," Michael continued, his whiskey-colored eyes burning with a dark, triumphant obsession, "any aristocratic delegate who disputes this dissolution or attempts to challenge her sovereignty will face an immediate, lethal physical contest with the crown. Is that understood?" A chorus of rapid, terrified affirmations leaked through the satellite connection. The elite hierarchy, utterly terrified by his preternatural dominance, submitted instantly. Michael terminated the call, returning the device to his pocket. He looked down at the petite Omega sitting in the silver sedan. "The law that destroyed your family no longer exists," Michael stated, his voice softening into a raw, gravelly whisper. "I utilized my authority to eradicate your enemies. I did not buy your proximity with exorbitant wealth, Sloane. I am attempting to prove that my power belongs entirely to you." Sloane stared at him, the monumental reality of his actions systematically dismantling her final defenses. He had just unilaterally rewritten a continent's legal infrastructure while standing in the freezing rain, simply to heal her trauma. Chapter 22. The meticulously constructed barriers that Sloane Delaney had utilized to navigate a hostile aristocratic society finally collapsed. Sitting in the driver's seat of her highly reliable silver sedan, surrounded by the chaotic fury of the torrential storm and the imposing barricade of his matte crimson Grand Tourer, she stopped analyzing the logical parameters of her existence. The bureaucratic red tape was gone, leaving only the profound, preternatural truth. "I am terrified," Sloane admitted, her voice a fragile, genuine whisper that completely abandoned her aggressive, polite professionalism. "I spent 12 years organizing details, mastering archaic dialects, and fighting for a microscopic shred of autonomy against apex predators. I do not know how to exist without my administrative armor." Michael Caldwell's expression softened, the sharp angles of his face relaxing into a mask of pure, unyielding devotion. He understood the staggering magnitude of the emotional transition he was demanding. He released his grip on her car window and took a deliberate step backward, standing fully exposed in the relentless downpour, offering her the ultimate, terrifying choice. "Step out of the vehicle, Sloane," Michael rumbled gently. "You will never have to organize another defense. You will never fight for your autonomy, because your authority will be absolute. Step into the rain, and I will be your impenetrable shield for the rest of our existence." Sloane looked at the midnight black leather evening tote resting in the footwell. Inside was her heavy digital tablet, the slate gray battery pack, and the solid platinum pen, the artifacts of her independent, exhausted life. She looked back at Michael. His stark black shirt was completely saturated, adhering to his broad, uncompromising shoulders, but he stood with a predatory stillness, waiting for her sovereignty. With a decisive, irreversible motion, Sloane engaged the electronic window control, rolling the glass up, and subsequently unbuckled her seatbelt. She pushed the driver's side door open, stepping out of the cabin. The storm instantly soaked her deep burgundy blazer and tailored trousers, plastering her glossy black hair to her pale skin. She did not shiver. The intense heat radiating from the Lycan King was a magnetic, intoxicating force. Michael closed the remaining distance in a single explosive stride. He wrapped his massive, heavily scarred arms around her waist, lifting her effortlessly off the slick asphalt. Sloane gasped, her hands immediately flying to his broad shoulders, her fingers threading passionately into his soaked, unruly dark hair. The physical proximity ignited an intense, undeniable chemistry that completely defied all logical explanation. Michael pulled her flush against his solid chest, completely enveloped by her signature fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea. He looked down into her expressive dark eyes, his own whiskey-colored gaze burning with a fierce, triumphant claiming. "Mine," Michael growled, the word a feral, biological absolute. "Yes," Sloane breathed, surrendering her indomitable confidence entirely to his preternatural bond. Michael's mouth descended on hers with breathtaking, earth-shattering precision. The kiss was not a gentle, tentative inquiry. It was a desperate, hungry confirmation of their shared existence. Sloane responded with equal fervor, her lips parting under his demanding pressure. The sheer, overwhelming intensity of the contact sent a cascading jolt of electricity through her nervous system, completely overriding the frigid chill of the rain. He kissed her as if she were the very oxygen his beast had been denied for a decade. His large, calloused hands gripped her waist possessively, anchoring her against the storm. Sloane's erratic, frantic pulse harmonized perfectly with the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart beneath his soaked shirt. The dark, cynical enforcer had been entirely eradicated, replaced by a devastatingly loyal mate who had just systematically dismantled a corrupt empire to ensure her safety. They stood entwined on the desolate highway, the matte crimson Grand Tour and the silver sedan acting as silent metallic sentinels. The heavily armored, sarcastic geopolitical translator had finally found an apex predator capable of matching her sassy audacity. Chapter 23. Michael Caldwell utilized his encrypted, matte black satellite phone, his calloused thumb navigating the interface despite the torrential downpour battering the desolate highway. He rapidly dispatched an elite royal recovery contingent to retrieve Sloane's abandoned silver compact sedan, specifically mandating that both her luggage and her midnight black leather evening tote containing her vital linguistic equipment and the solid platinum pen, be immediately transferred into his own vehicle. He then guided Sloane into the heated passenger enclave of his custom matte crimson Grand Tourer, ensuring her administrative arsenal rested securely at her feet. Sloane sank into the luxurious midnight leather interior, her soaked, deep burgundy blazer dripping onto the expensive upholstery. Though frigid rainwater saturated her tailored trousers, an indomitable warmth proliferated throughout her nervous system. She was inexorably tethered to the preternatural monarch navigating the spectacular vehicle. From the back seat, Ninny, the chunky orange tabby, whose ventilated carrier had been hastily transferred, issued a highly indignant yowl regarding the chaotic vehicular logistics. "I apologize for the sudden transfer, Ninny," Michael stated, a cynical, genuine amusement dancing in his whiskey-colored eyes as he steered the massive vehicle back toward the Summit Hotel. "But your owner is officially assuming a new administrative position." They bypassed the primary valet roundabout, arriving through a discreet, highly fortified subterranean security corridor. Elite enforcers immediately swarmed the vehicle, their postures rigidly deferential to their king and his newly claimed queen. Sloane was escorted back to the sanctuary of the West Wing. The shattered, heavy oak door of Suite 402 had already been completely replaced by the Crown's emergency architectural detail, the physical damage from the rogue alphas having been rapidly scrubbed from the hallway. Inside, the suite was warm, the mechanical gas fireplace maintaining its flawless blue and orange combustion. They utilized the luxurious ensuite facilities sequentially to eradicate the frigid rainwater. Sloane emerged having donned a pristine, deeply rich plum-colored pantsuit, the structured silhouette projecting absolute, uncompromising authority. She twisted her damp black hair into a severe French twist. Michael emerged wearing a fresh, stark black tailored suit, expeditiously delivered to the suite by his royal attendants, that seamlessly concealed his heavily scarred torso. He withdrew the heavy silver signet ring from his pocket, sliding the royal crest onto his finger. The undercover enforcer facade was permanently terminated. When he looked at Sloane, his whiskey-colored eyes flared with an intense, possessive devotion. His feral wolf preened, entirely satiated by her intoxicating crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea fragrance. "The geopolitical assembly requires our immediate attendance," Michael murmured, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble as he offered his arm. "We have a treaty to finalize," Sloane agreed, slipping her arm through his, her preternatural omega instincts thrumming with confident lethality. They descended the sweeping marble staircase, entering the cavernous architecture of the grand boardroom. The assembly of elite guards and rival diplomats murmured with palpable, volatile anxiety. Standing near the center of the room was Lord Harrington, the opportunistic delegate who had attempted to force Sloane into a dance the previous evening. He looked profoundly stressed, clutching a digital tablet. Michael halted at the head of the massive mahogany table. He did not release Sloane's hand. The ambient temperature in the colossal room plummeted, a suffocating, lethal pressure descending upon the marble floor. "The Lithos Holding Syndicate has been eradicated," Michael declared, his voice a dark, gravelly rumble that vibrated the very foundation of the estate. "And the archaic territorial laws supporting their infrastructure have been formally dissolved." Lord Harrington blanched, his arrogant facade fracturing as his gaze snapped toward Sloane, recognizing the profound shift in the preternatural power dynamic. "Your Majesty, this is an egregious violation of hierarchical protocol. You cannot elevate a working-class translator to the sovereign throne. She is a logistical liability. Sloane lifted her chin, projecting an aura of unbothered, indomitable confidence. She relied heavily on her cheerful customer service voice defiance to mask the residual adrenaline thrumming through her veins. "I assure you, Lord Harrington," Sloane replied sweetly, "my logistical capabilities vastly exceed your antiquated political maneuvers. Furthermore, I will be personally auditing your territorial funding, effective immediately." Chapter 24. The suffocating silence within the cavernous grand boardroom was absolute. Lord Harrington's pale eyes widened in unmitigated terror as the implications of Sloane Delaney's cheerful threat registered. The rival Lycan diplomats, previously arrogant, suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered not by preternatural violence, but by weaponized administrative oversight. Michael Caldwell stood beside his mate, his broad, uncompromising shoulders radiating a volatile, exhausting intensity that demanded total compliance. His heavy platinum chronograph watch glinted under the boardroom lighting as he rested his calloused hands on the mahogany table. "The Queen's directives are absolute," Michael rumbled, his voice a dark, lethal vibration. "Any delegate who fails to submit their financial ledgers to her direct scrutiny will be considered hostile to the Crown and will be physically dismantled. Is that understood?" A synchronized, hasty chorus of affirmations echoed through the room. The elite hierarchy, accustomed to leveraging obscure laws to manipulate the working class, was completely subjugated by a monarch who had just handed their entire financial infrastructure over to the most vindictive auditor on the continent. Sloane retrieved her heavy digital tablet, delivered promptly by a royal guard, and securely tethered her slate-gray portable battery pack. She tapped the indestructible screen with her silver-nibbed fountain pen, projecting an aura of total administrative supremacy. "Excellent," Sloane announced, her administrative tone dripping with razor-sharp authority. "Please form a single-file line. We will begin processing the mandatory forfeiture forms." For the subsequent 4 hours, the terrifying apex predators of the Lycan Summit were subjected to excruciating bureaucratic torment. Sloane systematically dismantled their corrupt tax shelters, utilizing her flawless translation skills to rewrite the territorial treaties. She legally established insurmountable protections for working-class pacts, ensuring the horrific slaughter her family endured could never be replicated. Michael remained at her side the entire time. He did not issue commands, he simply watched her operate. The cynical, ruthless king was utterly mesmerized by the sheer, unbothered audacity of his mate. His feral wolf, usually driven by territorial aggression, curled into a state of absolute, unprecedented submission, perfectly content to act as the lethal muscle supporting her clipboard. As the final, exhausted delegate hastily signed his revised treaty and fled the boardroom, Sloane tapped the screen of her digital tablet, finalizing the archive. She exhaled a long, measured breath, the profound tension that had haunted her neurology for a decade finally dissipating. Michael turned to her, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes devoid of their usual volatile intensity, replaced entirely by a dark, reverent devotion. "Your efficiency remains staggering." "I am a highly motivated professional," Sloane replied, a genuine, brilliant smile breaking through her professional armor. She swiped her pale finger across the indestructible screen, pulling up a highly structured, newly generated file, and rotated the heavy tablet to face him squarely on the mahogany table. "What is this?" Michael asked, a cynical smirk playing across his sharp, aristocratic jawline. "This is Form 9C, Mandatory Human Resources Training for Sovereign Entities," Sloane explained sweetly. Your tendency to utilize bone-cracking violence as a primary conflict resolution tool creates an unnecessarily hostile work environment. You are scheduled for a 3-hour seminar tomorrow morning. Michael let out a low, breathy sound that constituted a genuine laugh. The terrifying Alpha King, who had just secured his continental reign, reached out and pulled the petite Omega flush against his solid chest. The luxurious, intoxicating blend of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea wrapped around him completely. "I will gladly submit to your training," Michael murmured, his lips hovering inches from hers, provided the instruction occurs exclusively within the confines of Suite 402. Sloane tilted her head, her dark eyes flashing with preternatural challenge and profound affection. "That can be administratively arranged." He captured her lips in a deep, breathtaking kiss, solidifying their newly forged, magnificent happily ever after. The indomitable translator and the insomniac Lycan King had successfully blended sharp, sassy humor with an unbreakable, preternatural romance, proving that sometimes the most effective weapon against an apex predator is a highly organized clipboard. Chapter 25. The following morning, the atmosphere within Suite 402 of the West Wing was a study in absolute, highly regulated domesticity. The mechanical gas fireplace operated with flawless consistency, its blue and warm orange flames providing a steady, comforting illumination across the thick Persian rug. The appliance required zero maintenance, its steady mechanical output perfectly satisfying Sloane Delaney's requirement for logistical predictability. Sloane sat on the plush velvet sofa, her posture projecting an aura of indomitable, unbothered authority. She had donned a striking, tailored charcoal gray pantsuit paired with a crimson silk blouse, the structured garment serving as her ultimate professional armor. Resting on the glass coffee table before her was the heavy digital tablet, securely tethered to its high-capacity slate gray portable battery pack. She gripped her trusty silver-nibbed fountain pen, her striking dark eyes focused entirely on the man occupying the opposite end of the cushions. Michael Caldwell, the sovereign Lycan King, sat in a posture of entirely unprecedented submission. He wore a simple, crisp, dark shirt and dark trousers, his broad, uncompromising shoulders relaxed against the velvet. His piercing, whiskey-colored eyes were fixed immutably on his fated mate. His preternatural beast, previously of volatile, exhausting intensity, was completely sedated by the luxurious, intoxicating fragrance of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea permeating the enclosed space. To complete the absurd tableau, Ninny, the remarkably grumpy, exceptionally chunky orange tabby cat, was currently sprawled across Michael's lap. The feline was purring loudly, aggressively rubbing his face against the priceless platinum chronograph watch adorning the monarch's wrist. "We will now commence Section 4 of your mandatory human resources curriculum," Sloane announced, deploying her relentlessly polite receptionist persona. She tapped the indestructible screen of her tablet with the silver nib. "This module covers acceptable geopolitical conflict resolution. Mr. Caldwell, if a rival delegate disputes a territorial taxation clause, what is the appropriate administrative response?" Michael offered a slow, cynical smirk that perfectly highlighted his sharp, aristocratic jawline. "I initiate a physical contest, systematically dismantle their skeletal structure, and forcibly annex their revenue streams." Sloane sighed, a sharp, highly disappointed sound. She aggressively organized a stray strand of glossy black hair back into her severe French twist. "Absolutely incorrect. The correct response is to issue a Form 12D Notice of Discrepancy, followed by an independent magical audit of their operational ledgers. Dismantling skeletal structures constitutes a gross violation of workplace safety protocols and severely negatively impacts diplomatic morale. My diplomatic morale is currently exceptional, Michael rumbled, his voice a dark, gravelly vibration that sent a highly distracting shiver down Sloane's spine. He reached up with a large, calloused hand, gently stroking Ninny's orange fur, much to the cat's profound satisfaction. Furthermore, the delegates submitted their revised treaties with remarkable celerity following my display of dominance. They submitted them because I threatened to personally review their expense reports. Sloane corrected sweetly, refusing to yield the administrative high ground. Your propensity for preternatural violence is a logistical liability. We are fundamentally restructuring this hierarchy. Ripping the throats out of your political adversaries generates an unacceptable amount of paperwork. Michael leaned forward, causing the chunky orange tabby to issue a minor, disgruntled trill at the sudden movement. The king ignored the feline, closing the physical distance between himself and his queen. The heat, radiating from his heavily scarred torso, easily bypassed her professional charcoal gray armor. I will gladly delegate all future geopolitical executions to your auditing department, Michael murmured, his whiskey-colored eyes darkening with an intense, possessive devotion. He gently pried the silver-nibbed fountain pen from her pale fingers, placing it deliberately onto the glass coffee table next to the slate-gray battery pack. However, my mandatory training session has exceeded its allotted hourly duration. Sloane's pulse executed a frantic, irregular rhythm against her collarbone. The bureaucratic red tape she so expertly wielded melted instantaneously under his proximity. The schedule explicitly mandates another 20 minutes of conflict de-escalation scenarios. I am currently prioritizing a different biological mandate, Michael whispered, his lips hovering mere millimeters from hers. Before she could cite another administrative clause, he captured her mouth in a deep, breathtaking kiss. The sheer, overwhelming chemistry incinerated the remaining HR curriculum, proving that while Sloane commanded the logistics of the realm, the Lycan King retained absolute authority over her preternatural heart. Chapter 26. 6 months later, the central administrative core of the continental preternatural hierarchy operated with an unprecedented, staggering efficiency. The pervasive political turmoil that had historically plagued the Lycan nobility had been systematically eradicated. The aristocratic pack elders, having been utterly decimated by the Queen's quick-witted, logical directives and relentless financial audits, now submitted to the Crown's protocols with absolute, unwavering obedience. The Royal Administrative Wing was an expansive, luxurious sanctuary of polished ebony and towering glass. Sloane Delaney stood behind a massive mahogany desk, her striking dark eyes scanning the digital archives displayed on her heavy tablet. Her slate-gray portable battery pack rested nearby, permanently ensuring uninterrupted power to the kingdom's logistical infrastructure. She possessed a flawless, indomitable confidence, projecting absolute authority in an elegant, tailored midnight blue pantsuit that perfectly complemented her pale porcelain skin. Her signature fragrance, a luxurious, intoxicating blend of crushed pomegranate and spiced white tea, filled the opulent space, establishing a tranquil, highly organized environment. The heavy oak doors to her office swung open, revealing the monolithic physical specimen who ruled the continent. Michael Caldwell stepped into the room, entirely devoid of the volatile, exhausting intensity that had defined his previous existence. The Lycan King was devastatingly rested. The feral panic that had once haunted his preternatural beast was permanently cured by the presence of his fated mate. He wore a stark, black tailored suit that seamlessly concealed his heavily scarred torso, moving with a relaxed, predatory grace. The heavy silver signet ring gleamed on his finger, matching the priceless platinum chronograph watch secured to his wrist. In his large, calloused arms, Michael effortlessly cradled Ninny. The remarkably grumpy, exceptionally chunky orange tabby cat possessed a highly judgmental expression, yet he made absolutely zero effort to escape the monarch's embrace. "The regional delegates have submitted their quarterly compliance ledgers," Michael announced, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a familiar, exhilarating shiver cascading down Sloane's spine. He approached the mahogany desk, gently depositing the massive feline onto the polished wood. Ninny immediately sauntered over to Sloane's heavy digital tablet, sniffing the indestructible screen before settling down beside her silver-nibbed fountain pen. "Are there any outstanding discrepancies?" Sloane inquired, utilizing her cheerful, customer service voice defiance, though it was now laced with profound, unmitigated affection. "None," Michael replied, a cynical smirk playing across his sharp, aristocratic jawline. Lord Harrington personally delivered his documentation 3 days early. He appeared to be sweating profusely at the mere prospect of you reviewing his territorial tax deductions. Sloane let out a bright, genuine laugh, entirely devoid of her former bureaucratic exhaustion. The crushing trauma that had once haunted her neurology was a distant memory, having been thoroughly dissolved by the Alpha King's absolute devotion and sweeping legislative reforms. She had successfully transitioned from an independent, fiercely defensive contractor into the most terrifying, highly respected geopolitical sovereign in preternatural history. Michael bypassed the desk, his broad, uncompromising shoulders blocking out the ambient light from the towering windows. He stepped into her personal perimeter, his immense, protective presence washing over her. Sloane leaned back against the edge of the mahogany desk, her dark eyes looking up at the man who had kicked down her door and irrevocably altered her universe. "You have entirely domesticated the apex predators of this continent," Michael murmured softly, his piercing, whiskey-colored eyes lifting to meet her gaze. "I simply applied rigorous organizational standards," Sloane corrected sweetly, reaching out to thread her pale fingers through his unruly dark hair, "and threatened them with insurmountable paperwork." Michael shifted his weight, his large, calloused hands coming to rest gently against the elegant midnight blue fabric of her suit. He slid his palms downward with exquisite reverence, his touch lingering over the subtle, unmistakable curve of her slightly rounded stomach. A profound, awestruck devotion overtook his features. The fiercely protective Lycan King leaned down, his dark hair brushing against her silk blouse. He pressed a gentle, deeply reverent kiss directly to her rounded stomach, his feral wolf completely satiated by the miracle of the new life growing within its highly capable, fiercely organized mate. "You executed a flawless logistical triumph," Michael whispered against her skin, the vibration of his voice resonating directly into her heart. "You cured my madness. You secured my territory, and you delivered the ultimate, impossible future." Sloane smiled, her preternatural omega instincts thrumming with absolute, visceral safety. The formidable human translator and the terrifying Lycan King had successfully forged a brilliant, magnificent happily ever after, proving unequivocally that true love is the ultimate administrative victory. The end. Quick favor, Pack. Don't go anywhere just yet. If you thought Sloane was brave for handing the Lycan King a literal invoice for kicking down her door and forcing him into an HR seminar, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this beautiful disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely unhinged.